The morale is so low in all these departments.
Okay. All right, so oh, good. Okay. I mean, the campaign has been there forever, right? Are you?
I got
Who are you
elected.
up against in the primary?
Well, the way he got elected,
I'm waiting to see.
you have to remember, first, he was in at the lowest tier of the Democrats who were running the first time.
There for 2 terms.
Then he did a brilliant commercial with his son, Dr. He had a slice of pizza with a nice report. He went to Italy. The guy has got bad news. Nobody got elected. He has stolen office in Columbus, statue and everything. And his wife and another Convenience statue. He did something. They took a but they decided, like themselves, that they needed more statues. Even pigeons find a tough place to settle on a female statue.
All right.
Who would you choose?
Much better.
If you want to do something, you put it in your head and you do it. And that's why I know that if my brother is mayor of New York City, it's going to get done. If he wants to clean up the city, he's already done it with no money. When we say that, some people think he makes money. He doesn't. He has his own job, the radio show, whatever he does. He gives money away all the time. He is dedicated, and that's what we need for this city now, dedication. I was here in the 70s. This is a hell of a lot worse than the 70s and the 80s. We need somebody who leads and believes in helping us rise and thrive and save New York City and rebuild it again. That's why I put my whole heart and soul behind my brother. And my sister Maria's here also. And Trish, our cousin. Because we believe in him, and we believe in you in New York to help him become the mayor. Thank you.
First off, thanks for all coming here tonight. It's a much better place than I normally talk to people in the bowels of the city subway system or some of the rougher neighborhoods. So I'm going to stand back and absorb some of this right after I share with you some of my ideas. But you have to first realize I would not be standing here if it hadn't been for the work of my wife Nancy, who has come here tonight with me to be involved with all of you to try to save our city. In fact, the interesting thing about Nancy, a number of interesting things, is that for the first time, there's going to be a Republican running in the Upper West Side for the city council seat, because the Democrats have basically had coronations. There have been no Republicans to stand up to them and say, wait a second, what about quality of life, the homelessness, the emotionally disturbed persons? And the number one issue for my wife, and almost the number one issue for me, and in fact, Rob Becerra is here, who's been gathering petitions for the newest party line that has ever existed in New York City, animal welfare. One issue alone. We are going to eliminate the kill shelters.
Yes.
There will never again, when I'm sworn in as mayor, be a dog or a cat or an animal that's either been turned in to animal care and control, that's what they're called, or that have been taken from the streets, who will be euthanized. Because you may not realize, millions of our tax dollars go to these shelters in what we think are going to be unwanted pets who get adopted out. And remember, we consider animals to be like our friends. Animals are like family members. In fact, let's be honest, for a lot of you, you'd much rather have a relationship with your dog and your cat rather than your husband, your wife, your parents, your children, your nieces, your nephews, your business partners, your co-workers. It's much better just to deal with your pets who are your family members. And in the animal care and control centers, they're only given 72 hours. They must be adopted. If they're not adopted, they get euthanized. Even if Governor Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo would have called from Owen, like the old black and white movies, remember there's a guy on death row, oh, I don't want to die. He's waiting for the reprieve from the governor to call right before he goes into the electric chair. The governor himself could look up on the computer and say, gee, I'd like to save Tuxedo Cat 8453. And they say, Gov, if you're not down here in 72 hours to declare for yourself that you want to adopt, and then we have to vet you out first, that cat will be euthanized. So on behalf of Nancy and Robert, Sarah, and all animal lovers everywhere, for the first time in New York City, there is an official line, animal welfare, that I'll also be running on in addition to Republican and Independent to give people a choice, but in which we are going to become like Los Angeles, Austin, and other cities. We are not going to have any more kill shelters. We are going to keep those animals alive. And it leads me right into a society that doesn't take care of its animals, certainly doesn't take care of its people. Look at our homeless people. Look at our emotionally disturbed persons. We have men and women who need to be in mental health facilities being given their medicine. And we have a program that was established by Bill de Blasio, the part-time mayor, the dope from Park Slope, and his wife, Charmaine. It has spent to date in 5 years $1.25 billion supposedly to provide mental health care to those in desperate need. In all the years that I've been walking the streets, I've never come across an intervention worker for Thrive. They don't help people in the streets or in the subways or the parks. You have to have a residence. It's a call-in center. It's a scam. When I get elected mayor, guess what? Department of Investigation, subpoena the records. Let's look at the spreadsheet. Where the damn money goes. And if necessary, indict them. Because what a disgraziata this has been a shanda. And none of the Democrats have demanded to see the books or subpoena the records. And these poor souls roam about, a danger to themselves and everyone else. And they're partly responsible for this incredible violent crime surge that we see taking place in almost every nook, cranny, and corner of this city. So they will be forcibly removed and given the mental health care that they properly deserve and their medicine. In addition, there are other groups of men and women who are out living in the streets who are not necessarily impaired mentally. There are shelters. Many of them have been jammed down the throats of citizens throughout the city. 62 have been constructed. The mayor planned on 80. He intends on satisfying that edict till the day he's out of office, and that can't come too quick. But these shelters are just warehouses. They provide no services. Many of these men and women have serious alcohol and drug addictions, serious emotional issues. They must check in at 10 o'clock at night or lose their bed. That's the curfew. They get kicked out at 7 in the morning. No services. And then they roam the streets. Now, if all of a sudden they're placed in your neighborhood, what are they going to do from 7 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night? They're not going to be traveling very far away because this is where they have to sleep at night. And it has created all kinds of problems in neighborhoods that traditionally were stabilized in this city that all of a sudden have an incredible number of problems as a result of a homeless shelter. That's going to stop. There will always be homeless people, but we're going to make sure that their needs are met. And the other thing I'm going to challenge is go to federal court. There is a standing federal court edict that says that if any man or woman comes to New York City, they can come in the Port Authority, Pound the Hound, come there. They can take a PATH train in the city. They can land in the middle of Times Square. If they declare that they're indigent, without means, no food, no medical, they have to be guaranteed shelter. 3 hots in a cot and Medicaid. Now, if you happen to be in Philadelphia, which has one of the worst shelter systems and no guarantee of any kind of service whatsoever, do you think you're going to come to New York City where you'll end up being provided with things you're not provided in Philadelphia or in Newark or Asbury Park or Scranton or wherever it is? That's got to stop. You know, if these people running for office would actually visit the shelters as I visited or talk to the homeless people, they would be amazed at a number of people who aren't even from New York who are homeless here. You see them every day. They're begging, They have little dogs, little cats to try to lure the money because they know you'll give money to the dogs and cats to feed them before you would feed the people. So all of those issues are going to be dealt with. But without public safety and law and order, nothing else can be addressed. Nothing! There has to be a priority. And a good campaign has 3 issues, a better campaign has 2 issues, and the best campaign has 1 issue. And that 1 issue is law and order, public safety, quality of life, and a return to the fact that you could be able to freely take a subway, walk to a park, go through the streets without being molested, assaulted, or stalked. And it's very simple. You refund the police by $1 billion and you hire an additional 3,000 police. Train them, get them out in the streets, let them know. I want you to be proactive again, not reactive by the horde of elected officials who have impaired our police. And imagine you have somebody out there named AOC. The acronym stands for All Out Crazy. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She has said if you want her blessing, her anointment to run for office, and actually a lot of Democrats do, please, Saint AOC All Out Crazy, please bestow upon me your embrace so that I can go on to victory. She wants $3 billion taken from the police budget. She wants no jails. Imagine, they want to close Rikers Island and not replace any jails. That makes no sense. So on day number 1, when I'm elected mayor, no parties, no raising the roof, none of that typical kind of euphoria that takes place after a victory. I'm going to travel the city from the furthest precinct out in Tottenville to precinct 1 in Chinatown, shake every man, every woman's hand who works for the police department, tell them to go out there and do your job. If you cross the line and you violate people's civil rights, I'll be your worst nightmare, because in the first 13 years of the Guardian Angels, I got locked up 76 times. I know what it is to get a wooden shampoo, a concrete facial. I know what it is to get an attitudinal readjustment and to be abused by the police. But I also know without police, a society will then suffer from anarchy. And we're not going in that direction. We're not going back to the 70s or 80s. And then the most important element for all of that is our education. Some of my adversaries come up with pretty good ideas. Some of them are Democrats. I know a lot of them are basically snacking off my ideas of law and order now. They've had an epiphany, you know, instead of defunding the police, they're now saying refunding. But that's good. So I heard the city controller, Scott Stringer, was at a UFT meeting that has endorsed him to become the next mayor. And he actually said that he wanted to do away with the Department of Education. The acronym stands for dumbest organization ever. That's right. And it sort of goes back to when Rudy Giuliani was mayor and he said that he wanted to blow up 110 Livingston Street at the time, which was the Board of Education that had preceded the DOE. Actually, he has a pretty good idea there. When we look at the $30 billion budget out of a $99 billion budget, it's a little less than a third. It goes to the Department of Education. When you start to look at how much money actually goes into the classroom, the hiring of teachers, giving supplies to the teachers to care for the children, it's pennies to the dollar. The money is going to sustain a bloated bureaucracy of bureaucrats who actually dictate the curriculum that's taught in the classrooms and how to teach it. And I'm saying to myself, when I was at PS 114 in Canarsie and in Jungle Jenny Wilson's class, nobody was telling Jungle Jenny Wilson what to teach. She had been teaching for probably a half a century at that point. And she was a great teacher. Can you imagine going into the classroom of teachers, many of them who remain idealistic, who want to make a difference in children's lives, and then you stifle them with bureaucracy and nonsense? That's going to stop when Curtis Lee was mayor. I'm going to empower the teachers, not the bureaucrats, and I'm going to look at that budget of the DOE, and I'm not going to strip the money, because the money is valuable, but I'm going to shift it from the offices right into the school classroom. Why is it the teachers have to buy supplies for the children? That is absolutely nuts. Nuts. came to school years ago, again, PS 114, Phillips C Junior High School, the teachers didn't have to dip into their pockets. Now they have to provide food, soap, shampoo, writing utensils, everything that's needed for the child to progress educationally. With $30 billion being spent on bloated bureaucrats and outrageous counselors and outside agencies that are subcontracted to tell you how to become a better teacher. And that was started by Bloomberg. That was nonsense to begin with. But they've gotten into that fashion of spending our tax dollars. Don't you think that those children should be supplied with everything they need to absorb education, to be fully engaged, and most importantly, to have the nutrition necessary to stay awake, to be cognizant of what the teacher is trying to train them? I mean, that's basic common sense. That's going to happen when I'm mayor. And you know, in the classroom, there is going to be no tolerance for kids who have behavioral issues. None whatsoever. Because when a teacher has to go into a classroom and is terrified of the students, we all lose. And I notice that in many instances, there are some out there, led by the public advocate, Jumaane Williams, who, by the way, wants to defund the police, defund prisons. Do you know that the public advocate has armed police security officers with him 24 hours a day from the NYPD? And take a guess where he lives. Take a guess. A man of the people, right? Jumaane Williams. He lives in the safest community in all 5 boroughs. The active garrison in Fort Hamilton and Army Base, in which he has to show ID every night when he's driven home by the NYPD, even though they know who he is, but he doesn't want anyone else to be asked about ID. Sanctimonious hypocrites, most of them are. And he's the one who wants to take the NYPD out of the schools, supervising the school public safety officers, and take metal detectors out of the schools. Now, is that crazy or what? Think of it. Are we taking metal detectors out of Yankee Stadium, Citi Field? Are we taking metal detectors out of Madison Square Garden? Are we taking metal detectors out of LaGuardia and JFK? Of course not. But we're going to take them out of schools where we know gangs go to school? And we've seen all the shootings in the streets, which is all about retaliation and revenge. You don't think they're going to bring a gun in the school and shoot another kid, shoot the teacher, shoot the custodian, shoot the assistant principal, the principal, or a parent who is there to help the teachers? Of course, we have to make sure it's a safe environment in school. In fact, we're going to accentuate safety in the classroom because the teachers are constantly under threat. They have anxiety. And by the way, they dread going back into that classroom if it's not a safe environment. That is priority number 1 in the schools. Teachers in many ways are like police officers. Police officers hired at $42,500 to start. And after 5 years, they don't rise on the financial ladder to $82,500. It takes 5 years to get there. And because they're making such little money, they end up living either with mommy and daddy in the basement or in a Castro convertible with 4 or 5 other people that are sharing an apartment. That's a disgrace. Teachers are pretty much in the same boat. Why do they have to serve 5 years before we start incrementally increasing their pay? So they're performing, they're going into schools that nobody else wants to teach in. We got to make sure that they're moving up the financial ramp, just as police officers ought to be moving up the financial ramp once they're active and they're engaged and they're teaching. And then the final thing about education, American history. History taught about how this country was formed, good, bad, and ugly. I want to learn about Christopher Columbus, but I want the kids to learn about indigenous peoples too. We just don't have enough history, period. And civics? Civics doesn't even exist. Children have no idea how government functions, who the elected officials are, who the appointed officials are, the importance of government. If you gave your money to a stockbroker on Wall Street, you'd be analytically analyzing every nickel, dime, and penny and busting his chops if you weren't making 4%, 5%, 6% on your investment. But we give our tax dollars to government. They get more from us than any stockbrokers or investors on your behalf do, and we never question how they spend their money. train the kids the function of government. And when they get older, they'll not only want to participate, but they'll want to be gadflies, they'll be watching over it, and they'll be better citizens, and a better community will result from that. So ladies and gentlemen, all of this is based on common sense. You elect Curtis Sliwa, you're going to have someone who doesn't surrender or retreat to all the enemies of our children and the enemies of our city. I'll take those adversaries on in a civil way, as I have the thugs and thugettes in New York City who have deprived people of their civil rights for 42 years. You can be assured of that. Thank you.